Central America has redrawn its borders more times than you can count, and the reasons why will make you question everything you know about how countries are formed. This is a region that went from being part of a massive empire to 7 independent nations in less than 200 years, with wars, revolutions, and border disputes that are still happening today. Here is what nobody tells you about Central American borders. When you look at a modern map, you see Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama, all neatly divided with clear boundaries. But in 1800, none of those countries existed as independent nations. The entire region was either Spanish colonial territory or would become part of short-lived unions that collapsed almost immediately. The borders we see today are the result of wars, treaties, and decisions made by people thousands of miles away who had never even visited the region. Let's start in 1800, because that is when Central America looked completely different. The entire region was part of the Viceroyalty of New Spain, a massive Spanish colonial territory that included Mexico, Central America, parts of the Caribbean, and even stretched into what is now the southern United States. There were no countries, just administrative divisions controlled from Mexico City and ultimately from Madrid. But then Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, and everything changed. Spanish colonies across the Americas began declaring independence, and Central America was swept up in this wave of revolutions. In 1821, Central America declared independence from Spain, but here is where it gets weird. They did not become independent countries. They immediately joined the Mexican Empire under Agustín de Iturbide, and honestly, that lasted about 2 years. By 1823, the Mexican Empire had collapsed, and Central America decided, you know what? We will do our own thing. They formed the Federal Republic of Central America, which included what is now Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. 5 provinces united under one federal government, kind of like the United States but in Central America. But the Federal Republic of Central America was doomed from the start. The provinces fought constantly over power, resources, and ideology. Liberals wanted a strong federal government and progressive reforms. Conservatives wanted regional autonomy and traditional Catholic values. The debates turned into actual civil wars, with armies from different provinces fighting each other for control. By 1838, the whole thing was falling apart. Nicaragua seceded first, then Honduras, then Costa Rica. Guatemala and El Salvador tried to hold on, but by 1841, the Federal Republic of Central America was officially dead. The region had gone from Spanish colony to Mexican territory to a unified federation to 5 separate countries in just 20 years. That's insane. Now, here is where the borders get really messy. Once these countries became independent, they had to figure out where their borders actually were. The Spanish had drawn administrative boundaries, but those lines were never meant to be international borders. Rivers changed course, mountains did not have clear demarcation lines, and different provinces claimed overlapping territories. The Guatemala-Honduras border became a nightmare. Both countries claimed the same territory, leading to armed conflicts throughout the 1800s. The border was not properly settled until 1933, over 90 years after both countries became independent. Even today, there are disputed areas where locals are not entirely sure which country they are in. El Salvador and Honduras had it even worse. Their border dispute erupted into the football war in 1969, a conflict often described as having begun after a soccer match. It was not really about soccer, it was about Salvadoran migration into Honduras and long-standing border disputes But the violence erupted after Honduras beat El Salvador in a World Cup qualifier. The war lasted 4 days, killed about 3,000 people, and the border was not fully demarcated until 1992. But here's something most people don't know. Panama wasn't even part of Central America originally. Panama was part of Colombia from 1821 to 1903. The United States wanted to build a canal across Panama, but Colombia kept refusing to give favorable terms. So, in 1903, the United States supported a Panamanian independence movement. Panama declared independence from Colombia, and 3 days later signed a treaty giving the United States control of the Panama Canal Zone. The Canal Zone is one of the strangest border situations in modern history. From 1903 to 1979, the United States controlled a 10-mile-wide strip of Panamanian territory that cut the country in half. Panama was technically independent, but the United States had sovereign rights over the Canal Zone. Panamanians living in their own country needed permission to cross from one side to the other. The United States did not fully hand over control until 1999, almost a century after taking it. And then there is Belize, which has the most bizarre history of any Central American country. Belize was a British colony called British Honduras from 1862 to 1981. While every other country in the region was fighting for independence in the early 1800s, Belize was just sitting there under British control. They did not become independent until 1981, making them the newest country in Central America by almost 160 years. But Guatemala has never accepted Belize's independence. Guatemala claims that Belize is actually Guatemalan territory that Britain stole in the 1800s. Even today, Guatemala's official maps sometimes show Belize as part of Guatemala. The dispute was not resolved until 2019, when both countries agreed to let the International Court of Justice decide, and the court ruled in Belize's favor in 2022. That was a border dispute that lasted over 150 years. Now here is where things get really interesting. The borders did not just change because of wars and independence movements. Geography changed them too. Rivers that formed natural boundaries shifted course over decades. The Coco River between Honduras and Nicaragua has moved significantly since the 1800s, creating disputed territories where nobody is quite sure which country has jurisdiction. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions have also changed borders in strange ways. Central America sits on multiple tectonic plates and has dozens of active volcanoes. When a major earthquake hits and a river changes course or a lake expands, suddenly villages that were in one country are now in another, or in disputed territory. Climate change is making this even worse. Rising sea levels are affecting coastal borders, droughts are drying up rivers that form boundaries, and extreme weather is reshaping coastlines. The borders that were drawn in the 1800s based on physical features are becoming meaningless as those features disappear or change. Unresolved, even in 2025, these border disputes are not fully resolved. Guatemala still has territorial claims on Belize that some politicians bring up. Honduras and El Salvador have areas along their border where demarcation is unclear. Nicaragua and Costa Rica have ongoing disputes over river navigation rights on the San Juan River, which forms part of their border. The reality is that Central American borders have never been stable. They have been redrawn by empires, wars, revolutions, treaties, court decisions, and natural disasters. What we see on maps today is just the current snapshot of borders that will probably keep changing as politics, economics, and geography continue to evolve. The 7 countries we recognize now, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama exist in their current form because of decisions made in the 1800s and the 1900s that could have gone completely differently. If the Federal Republic of Central America had survived, we might have one country instead of 7. If the U.S. had not supported Panama's independence, Panama would still be part of Colombia. If Britain had not colonized Belize, it might be part of Guatemala. Central America's borders are basically arbitrary lines drawn by people who often had no idea what local reality was, and those lines have caused wars, displacement, economic problems, and political tensions that continue today. The region that was supposed to unite after independence from Spain ended up more divided than ever. Which Central American border dispute surprised you most? Drop it in the comments.